The intruder had made a fatal mistake. In the pre-dawn darkness of Michael Harrington's law office, the security alarm had been skillfully disabled, the lock picked with professional precision. But the man now moving silently through the room hadn't counted on Mike's decades-old habit of arriving before sunrise. Nor had he anticipated the sixth sense that 30 years of special operations and FBI work had instilled in the attorney. Mike stood perfectly still in the doorway, watching the shadowy figure rifle through his files. The Ramirez case, the Chen documents, exactly what he'd suspected they'd be after. The intruder sensed his presence, too late, spinning with military quickness, a silenced pistol materializing in his gloved hand. Mike's combat-trained mind registered multiple details simultaneously. Mercenary-grade equipment, the stance of someone with professional training, the deliberate control that marked a killer rather than a thief. "Hands where I can see them, old man," the intruder commanded softly. "This doesn't have to get messy." Mike raised his hands slowly, the picture of compliance. "Taking up burglary now, son? The economy must be hitting everyone hard." The intruder approached cautiously, maintaining professional distance. "The files. Where are the originals?" "Which files might those be?" Mike's voice remained calm, his posture relaxed, a studied nonchalance that had disarmed enemies from Baghdad to Belgrade. "Don't play stupid." The man grabbed Mike's shoulder, spinning him roughly to face the wall, then seized his silver-streaked hair in a tight grip, yanking his head back. "The Ramirez and Chen cases. The evidence you've collected on Phoenix development. Where is it?" The hair pull was meant to establish dominance, to cause pain and humiliation. Instead, it triggered something else, a switch that Mike Harrington had kept carefully hidden beneath his respectable attorney persona. His response was instantaneous, muscle memory from thousands of training hours. A precision elbow strike to the solar plexus, followed by a lightning-fast palm heel to the chin that snapped the intruder's head back. As the man staggered, Mike executed a textbook Krav Maga disarm, twisting the gun away while simultaneously sweeping the attacker's legs. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. The intruder hit the hardwood floor with a dull thud, gasping for breath, Mike's knee now firmly planted on his sternum, the man's own weapon pressed against his temple. "First mistake," Mike said conversationally, "breaking into my office. Second mistake, pulling my hair. That particular move brings back memories I don't care to revisit." With practiced efficiency, Mike secured the intruder with his own zip ties, then removed the man's mask. The face beneath was younger than he'd expected, mid-30s perhaps, with the hardened features of someone accustomed to violence. "Military background," Mike guessed. "Special forces, possibly." "Who sent you?" Mike asked, though he already had his suspicions. The man spat on the floor. "You're dead, Harrington. You just don't know it yet." Mike methodically searched the intruder, finding no identification but discovering a military-grade communications device and a keycard with a distinctive corporate logo, a stylized mountain peak in silver. "Phoenix Development," Mike murmured, holding up the keycard. "Not even trying to hide it, are they?" A flicker of surprise crossed the man's eyes before his professional mask returned. Mike pocketed the items, then secured the intruder to a radiator pipe. He'd call the police eventually, but first, he had a few preparations to make. The opening move in this game had just been played, exactly as he'd anticipated. Mike glanced at his watch, 5:17 a.m. The morning was young, but it promised to be an eventful day. The fog clung to the red brick buildings of Westbridge, a quiet suburb just outside Boston. Main Street remained empty at this hour, the storefronts dark sentinels lining the road like soldiers from another era. Only the faint glow of a single office window punctured the pre-dawn darkness. Mike's office, where he had left his unexpected visitor securely restrained while he made a strategic retreat to assess the situation. Mike paused at the entrance to his building upon his return, scanning the street with practiced vigilance. Something felt off. His gaze lingered on a black SUV parked across the street, engine off, windows tinted beyond legality. It hadn't been there yesterday. 30 years in service to his country had honed instincts that most civilians would never understand. The prickling sensation at the base of his neck was an old friend, a silent alarm system that had saved his life more times than he cared to remember. But he was no longer Agent Harrington of the FBI or Captain Harrington of the Special Forces. Now he was just Michael Harrington, attorney at law, or so his business card claimed. The familiar creak of century-old wooden floors greeted him as he made his way up the stairs, his footsteps echoing through the empty corridor. At 53, Mike carried himself with the poised confidence of a much younger man, his 6-foot frame still maintaining the disciplined physique of his military days. His salt and pepper hair remained cropped short, his face weathered by years of service, yet remarkably unlined for a man who had seen what he had seen. His office occupied the entire 3rd floor, not because his practice was expansive, but because he valued the tactical advantage of controlling all access points. The space was meticulously organized. Law books lined mahogany shelves, framed credentials hung in simple black frames, and a large window overlooked Main Street. Nothing flashy, nothing excessive, just like Mike himself. The intruder was exactly where he'd left him, consciousness now fully returned, eyes following Mike with cold calculation. "The police will be here soon," Mike informed him, setting down his briefcase. "Breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted robbery. That's a hefty sentence, even for a first-time offender. Though I suspect this isn't your first rodeo." "You have no idea what you're involved in," the man replied, his voice steady despite his compromised position. "Walk away from the Ramirez and Chen cases, while you still can." Mike studied him thoughtfully, then moved to his desk, reviewing the files that the intruder had been examining. The Ramirez case lay open. Miguel Ramirez, 73, a decorated Army veteran who had served 2 tours in Korea, now facing eviction from the grocery store his family had run for 3 decades. Beside it was the Chen family's case. Lee Chen, 68, whose husband had been a military translator during the Korean War. Their restaurant was being targeted for redevelopment by Phoenix Development. Both families, along with a dozen others, were up against a corporate giant with deep pockets and deeper political connections. The pattern was too precise to be coincidental. Phoenix systematically targeting properties owned by aging veterans or their families. Not random acquisitions, but a deliberate strategy. Mike's phone rang, breaking the morning silence. "Harrington, Arcia," he answered, his voice crisp. "Morning, counselor." The voice belonged to Detective James Carter, Jimmy to his friends, of which Mike was one of the few, a 20-year veteran of the Boston Police Department and Mike's former brother-in-arms from Desert Storm. "Got your message. Breaking and entering at your office?" "That's right. The perpetrator is secured and waiting for pickup." "I'll be there in 10, Jimmy said. "Anything I should know before I arrive?" Mike glanced at the intruder, who was watching the conversation with keen interest. "Let's just say it's related to the cases we discussed yesterday." "The Phoenix development angle? Damn, they're not wasting any time." "No, they're not. See you soon." Mike ended the call and turned his attention back to the intruder. "Final chance to tell me who sent you." The man's expression remained impassive. "You think a night in lockup scares me? Whoever your police friend is, he won't be able to hold me. By this time tomorrow, I'll be back on the street." "Probably," Mike agreed, "but by then I'll know exactly who you are. Facial recognition software has come a long way since I was with the Bureau." He smiled thinly. "You'd be surprised what old friends will do as a favor." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed the man's features. Sullivan's Diner had been serving the best coffee in Westbridge since 1962. Its worn leather booths and chrome accents were unchanged since the Kennedy administration, exactly why Mike preferred it. Places with history rarely held surprises. Detective Carter was already seated in the corner booth when Mike arrived. At 52, Jimmy was a Boston stereotype come to life. Irish heritage worn proudly on his sleeve, accent thick enough to spread on toast, and a bulldog loyalty to those he considered friends. His salt and pepper hair was cropped short, and decades of police work had etched permanent lines around his eyes. "You're looking at trouble again, Mike," he said by way of greeting, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "These Phoenix folks don't play nice." Mike accepted the envelope without opening it. "Tell me something I don't know, Jimmy." The waitress, Doris, who'd been working at Sullivan's since before either of them were born, brought coffee without being asked. "Black for Mike, 2 sugars for Jimmy." Some routines were sacred. Our friend from this morning has quite the resume, Jimmy continued, his voice low. Marcus Delaney, former Army Rangers, dishonorable discharge in 2018 for excessive force during an operation in Syria. Since then, he's worked private security for several high-profile clients with questionable ethics. Any direct connection to Phoenix? Nothing on paper, but his last three known employers all had business dealings with them. Jimmy leaned forward. And here's where it gets interesting. Delaney was released less than an hour after booking. Some high-priced lawyer showed up with paperwork. Judge Harriman signed off on it personally. Harriman? Mike raised an eyebrow. He's not even in the rotation for bail hearings this week. Exactly. Someone pulled strings, and they weren't subtle about it. Jimmy tapped the envelope. There's more. 3 attorneys who filed against Phoenix in the last 5 years. One disbarred on trumped-up ethics violations. One suffered a convenient break-in where only case files were stolen. The third had a car accident that left him in physical therapy for 8 months. Mike sipped his coffee, his expression unchanged. And the connection? Nothing that would stand up in court. But in my gut, Jimmy tapped his stomach, clear as day. Your gut isn't admissible evidence, detective. No, but it's kept me alive for 30 years on the job. He leaned forward. What's your angle here, Mike? You've got a nice practice, comfortable life. Why poke the bear? Mike's eyes met his, and for a moment something fierce flickered behind them. Because someone has to. Jimmy studied him, then nodded slowly. Just watch your back. Word is Alexander Reed himself is taking an interest in these cases. That's unusual for a CEO of his stature. Interesting, Mike murmured, filing away this information. Reed, the name sounds familiar. Should be. Former CIA, worked Eastern Europe during the Cold War, then private sector. Made his first fortune in defense contracts after the wall fell. Mike's expression remained neutral, but something shifted behind his eyes. A connection forming, a puzzle piece clicking into place. Anything else I should know? Jimmy hesitated. Reed's got friends in the department, high up. If you need help, official channels might not be your best bet. The implication hung between them. Mike simply nodded and finished his coffee. As they parted outside the diner, Jimmy caught his arm. Mike, I'm serious. These people, they're not just rich bullies. There's something else going on with Phoenix. Mike gave him a reassuring smile. I appreciate the concern, Jimmy. I really do. Just promise me you'll be careful. Always am, he replied, already walking away. What Jimmy couldn't see was the way his hand tightened around his car keys, knuckles white with tension. Or the way his eyes swept the street, cataloging faces, vehicles, potential threats. These were old habits. Habits that had once kept him alive in circumstances far more dangerous than a legal battle with corporate predators. The black SUV was now parked across from the diner. The lock on his front door had been picked. To the untrained eye, nothing would appear amiss, but Mike spotted the nearly invisible scratch marks immediately. He didn't enter. Instead, he circled around to the back of his lakeside cabin, where a hidden entrance provided a secondary access point. Inside, he moved silently through the darkened house, every sense heightened. Nothing seemed disturbed, yet everything felt wrong. They had been here, whoever they were, looking but not taking, searching but not stealing. A message then, we can reach you anywhere. When he was certain the house was empty, Mike moved to his study and pulled down a seemingly ordinary book on constitutional law. Behind it, a small keypad appeared. He entered a 12-digit code and a section of the hardwood floor slid away, revealing a concealed safe. From it, he withdrew a weathered file folder with classified Desert Hawk stamped across his cover in faded red ink. Mike spread the contents across his desk, eyes scanning documents he hadn't viewed in decades. Operation Desert Hawk, Iraq, 1991. His Special Forces unit had been tasked with infiltrating a secret chemical weapons facility during the Gulf War. The mission had been classified beyond top secret, known only to a handful of people in the entire Pentagon. The team photograph showed 6 men in desert fatigues, faces young and determined. Mike traced his finger across the image, naming each man silently. 3 were now dead. One was Jimmy Carter. And the last, son of a bitch, Mike whispered, pulling out his phone. He dialed a number from memory. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered, It's been a while, Thompson. Harrington? The voice on the other end sounded surprised but not displeased. What's the occasion? Someone die? Not yet, but I think we might have a problem. Does the name Phoenix Development mean anything to you? A long pause. Should it? Their CEO is Alexander Reed. Another longer pause. Well, shit. My thoughts exactly. We need to talk. In person. My shop. Tomorrow morning. 0600. I'll make coffee. Copy that. Mike hung up, his mind racing. He returned to the photographs, focusing on one figure in particular, a young CIA liaison officer assigned to their unit, Alexander Reed, then a rising star in the agency's Special Activities Division. The man who had tried to stop them from reporting what they'd found in that facility. The man who had threatened to bury them if they didn't forget what they'd seen. The man who, according to their commanding officer, had been killed in action 2 weeks later. Yet here he was, 30 years later, very much alive and running a development company that seemed particularly interested in properties owned by veterans. Veterans like Miguel Ramirez and Lee Chen's husband. Men who might have served in the same region during the same conflict. This wasn't about real estate. This was about something else entirely. Mike carefully returned the files to the safe and closed the hidden compartment. Tomorrow would bring answers, or at least better questions. For now, he needed to secure his home, check for surveillance devices, and prepare for visitors who might return. As he moved methodically through these tasks, a text message came through on his phone. Dinner Sunday? I'm in town for the weekend. Jay, Jennifer, his daughter. 28 years old and the only family he had left since Caroline had lost her battle with cancer 5 years ago. An investigative journalist with the Boston Tribune, fiercely independent and these days distressingly distant. Their relationship had grown strained after Caroline's death. Jennifer blamed him for not being there enough during her mother's final months. She wasn't wrong. He'd been working a case, one he couldn't walk away from, not even for his dying wife. It was a choice he would regret until his dying day. He typed back, looking forward to it. My place, 6 p.m. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he added, Miss you, kiddo. The reply came quickly. Miss you too, Dad. Mike smiled faintly, pocketing his phone. Whatever storm was brewing, he would need to keep Jennifer far from it. She had already lost one parent. He wouldn't let her lose another. Robert Bobby Thompson's auto repair shop sat on the outskirts of town, a sprawling garage surrounded by a graveyard of classic cars in various states of resurrection. At 60, Bobby was still built like the Special Forces operative he'd once been, his muscular frame showing little concession to age. Only his full beard, now completely white, betrayed his years. The sign above the door read Thompson's Classic Auto Restoration. But locals knew that Bobby could fix anything with moving parts, from a 1957 Chevy to a modern-day drone. What they didn't know was that before becoming a mechanic, Bobby had been the best weapons specialist in the entire Special Forces. Mike arrived at precisely 6 a.m., parking his vintage 1967 Ford Mustang, midnight blue, meticulously maintained, beside Bobby's red pickup truck. The garage door was already open, light spilling out into the pre-dawn darkness. Still driving that old beauty, I see, Bobby called out, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Come on in. Coffee's hot, and Sarah's already here. Sarah, Mike raised an eyebrow as he entered the warmth of the garage. You called Mitchell? Damn right I did. When you mentioned Reed, I figured we needed all hands on deck. The interior of the garage was immaculate, tools arranged with military precision along the walls. A restored 1965 Shelby Cobra gleamed under the overhead lights, its polished chrome reflecting the fluorescent glow. At the back, a door led to Bobby's office, a space that looked more like a high-tech command center than a mechanic's workspace. Sarah Mitchell sat at the desk, typing rapidly on a laptop. At 50, she retained the striking presence that had once made her the FBI's most effective undercover operative. Her dark hair showed strands of silver, pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her sharp green eyes flicked up as Mike entered. Harrington looking good for an old man. Mitchell, still breaking hearts and taking names. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Only when necessary. Now tell us about Reed. Mike took the offered cup of coffee from Bobby and settled into a chair. Phoenix Development has been systematically targeting properties owned by veterans or their families. Specifically veterans who served in the Gulf War, particularly those with any connection to Iraq. Bobby frowned. That can't be coincidence. It's not, Sarah confirmed, turning her laptop around. I've been digging since Bobby called last night. Phoenix has acquired 17 properties in the Boston area in the last 3 years. Every single one was owned by someone with military connections to Iraq or Kuwait between 1990 and 1991. That's not all, Mike continued. The CEO is Alexander Reed. Bobby's hand tightened around his coffee mug. Reed is dead. He died in Iraq, 1991. Apparently not, Mike replied. And he's not just alive, he's thriving. Phoenix development is worth billions, with projects in 14 states. Why now, Sarah asked. Why target these veterans 30 years later? Because of what we found, Mike said quietly. Operation Desert Hawk. The facility near Basra. Bobby's expression darkened. We were told to forget what we saw there. We were, Mike agreed. But what if someone didn't forget? What if someone kept records? Evidence. Like Mr. Chen, Sarah interjected, looking at her screen. Li Chen's husband, David Chen, was a military translator attached to intelligence units operating in southern Iraq. He died 3 days after receiving Phoenix's first offer for their restaurant. Mike nodded grimly. Heart attack, supposedly. And Miguel Ramirez? Bobby asked. Served with the 82nd Airborne, was part of a convoy that passed near Basra during the same period we were there. The three veterans exchanged knowing looks, decades of shared experience, allowing for silent communication that civilians could never understand. Reed is cleaning house, Sarah said finally, eliminating anyone who might remember what happened at that facility. But why now? Bobby repeated. Why wait 30 years? That's what we need to find out, Mike replied. Whatever was in that facility, whatever they were doing there, Reed thinks someone has evidence. Evidence that could still hurt him even after all this time. Or evidence that could stop whatever he's planning now, Sarah added. Operations like this don't just happen for revenge or cleanup. There's always a current objective. The door to the garage suddenly opened, and all three veterans tensed, instinctively reaching for weapons they no longer carried. Bobby relaxed first. It's just Jimmy, he said. I called him too. Detective Carter entered the office, snow-dusting his coat. Morning, folks. Sorry I'm late. Had to make sure I wasn't followed. He looked around at the assembled group, a faint smile touching his lips. Well, the old team back together, just like Basra, minus the sandstorms and gunfire. Don't jinx it, Bobby muttered. Jimmy placed a thick file folder on the desk. The SUV that's been following you, Mike, registered to a shell company that traces back to Volkov Industries. Sarah's head snapped up. Anton Volkov, the Russian arms dealer? The very same, Jimmy confirmed. And guess who's been seen having dinner with our friend Alexander Reed 3 times in the past month? Mike's expression hardened. Volkov was KGB during the Cold War, specialized in weapons development, particularly chemical and biological. Just like the facility we found, Bobby said quietly. I think, Mike said, standing up and pacing the small office, it's time we paid a visit to Mr. Reed, not as lawyers or cops or ex-military, but as the people who know what he did 30 years ago and what he might be planning now. That's a dangerous game, Mike, Sarah warned. Reed has resources, protection. He's not some small-time crook you can intimidate with a badge. I don't have a badge anymore, Mike replied. None of us do. That's what makes us dangerous. We've got nothing to lose. Speak for yourself, Jimmy objected. I've got a pension coming in 5 years. The tension broke as they all chuckled. Even in the darkest moments, gallows humor had been their refuge. I'm not suggesting we go in guns blazing, Mike clarified. Just reconnaissance, information gathering. Figure out what Reed is really after and why these specific veterans matter to him. Bobby nodded slowly. I can set up surveillance on Reed's office and home. Sarah can work her magic on Phoenix's financial records. Jimmy can pull whatever strings he has left in the department. And you, Mike, I'll continue representing the Ramirez and Chen families, Mike finished. Keep everything looking normal on the surface while we dig deeper. As they began formulating their plan, Mike's phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced down, expecting Jennifer. Instead, an unknown number displayed a message that sent ice through his veins. Tell your daughter to be more careful with her investigative reporting. The Tribune building has such dangerous stairs. The blood drained from Mike's face. What is it? They're asked, noticing his reaction. Jennifer, Mike managed, already heading for the door. They're targeting Jennifer. The Boston Tribune occupied a 12-story building in the heart of downtown, its Art Deco facade a testament to the glory days of print journalism. Mike parked haphazardly at the curb, ignoring the no parking signs, and sprinted toward the entrance. Security tried to stop him, a young guard stepping forward with an outstretched hand. But Mike flashed an ID card that made the man step back quickly. Some credentials never expired. Not really. The elevator seemed impossibly slow. Mike checked his watch, 7:45 a.m. Jennifer would be at her desk by now, working on whatever story had caught her journalistic instincts. Working on whatever story had put her in danger. The newsroom was a bustling open floor, desks arranged in clusters, the clatter of keyboards and murmur of phone conversations creating a background hum of activity. Mike scanned the room, looking for his daughter's familiar face. He spotted her by the windows, head bent over her laptop, dark hair falling forward to frame her face, so like her mother that it sometimes hurt to look at her. She was deeply focused, unaware of his approach until he was standing right beside her desk. "Dad?" Jennifer looked up, surprise and confusion crossing her features. "What are you doing here?" Before he could answer, a commotion near the elevators drew their attention. Two men in expensive suits had entered the newsroom, moving with the confident stride of people used to intimidating others. Behind them, a third man appeared, tall, distinguished, with silver-streaked dark hair and the tan of someone who spent time on yachts rather than in offices. Alexander Reed. Mike instinctively moved to position himself between Reed and Jennifer, his body tensing for confrontation. But Reed wasn't looking at them. He was heading toward the editor's office, his entourage in tow. "Dad, seriously, what's going on?" Jennifer demanded, standing now. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "We need to talk," Mike said, his voice low and urgent. "Not here, grab your things." Jennifer's journalistic instincts kicked in, her eyes narrowing. "This is about Phoenix Development, isn't it? You're working a case against them, and I'm investigating their labor practices for a story." Mike froze. "Your what?" "3 workers have disappeared from their construction sites in the last month. Immigrant laborers, no documentation. Nobody's asking questions, but I am." She studied her father's face. "How did you know about my story?" "I didn't," Mike admitted. "But Reed knows about you, and that puts you in danger." Jennifer opened her mouth to protest, but at that moment, Reed emerged from the editor's office. His gaze swept the newsroom, calculating and cold. When his eyes landed on Mike, a flash of recognition crossed his face, quickly masked by a professional smile. He changed direction, heading straight for them. "Well, this is an unexpected pleasure," Reed said as he approached, his voice cultured and smooth. "Michael Harrington, it's been, what, 30 years?" "Reed," Mike acknowledged, his posture shifting subtly into a defensive stance. "You're looking well for a dead man." Reed's smile didn't waver. "Reports of my demise were administrative in nature, necessary for the work I was doing." His gaze shifted to Jennifer. "And this must be your daughter, the talented Ms. Harrington whose byline I've been seeing lately." Jennifer looked between the two men, confusion evident. "You know each other?" "Your father and I worked together briefly during the Gulf War." Reed extended his hand to Jennifer. "Alexander Reed, CEO of Phoenix Development. I was just speaking with your editor about some concerns regarding a story you're researching." Jennifer didn't take his hand. "My stories are factually accurate, Mr. Reed. If you have specific concerns, you can direct them to our legal department." Reed withdrew his hand, his smile cooling several degrees. "Spirited, like your father." He turned back to Mike. "We should catch up sometime, Harrington. Talk about old times, desert operations, chemical concerns." The threat was thinly veiled. Mike stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Stay away from my daughter, Reed. Whatever is between us, it stays between us." "Nothing is just between us anymore," Reed replied, equally quiet. "Too many people remember too many things. People like Miguel Ramirez, like David Chen." He straightened his already immaculate tie. "People die, Harrington, especially old soldiers with failing health. It's the natural order of things. With a final nod to Jennifer, Reed turned and walked away, his security detail falling in behind him. Jennifer rounded on her father the moment the elevator doors closed behind Reed. What the hell was that about? How do you know Alexander Reed? And why did he just threaten the Ramirez family? Mike took her arm, guiding her back to her desk. Pack up what you need. You're not staying here. Dad, I have a job to do, a story to finish. And I'd like you to stay alive to write it, Mike replied, his voice sharper than he intended. Seeing the hurt flash across Jennifer's face, he softened his tone. Please, Jen, trust me on this. Reed is dangerous, more dangerous than you can imagine. Jennifer studied him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. She saw past the aging lawyer, past the absent father who had missed so much of her life for work. She saw the soldier, the agent, the man who had spent his life standing between danger and the innocent. Okay, she said finally, but you're going to tell me everything. No more secrets, Dad. I mean it. Mike nodded, relief washing over him. No more secrets, I promise. As they left the Tribune building, Mike scanned the street with practiced eyes. The black SUV was parked half a block away. Watching, waiting. The game had changed now. Reed knew that Mike remembered him, knew that Mike was connecting the dots. And Reed had made it clear that anyone Mike cared about was fair game. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was here. The safe house was a modest 3-bedroom ranch on the outskirts of town, surrounded by pine trees that provided both natural camouflage and a tactical perimeter. To neighbors, it was simply Sarah Mitchell's weekend retreat, a place for a successful security consultant to escape the pressures of city life. In reality, it was a fortress disguised as a home. Mike guided his daughter's Prius up the gravel driveway, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. They had taken a circuitous route, switching vehicles twice to ensure they weren't followed. The black SUV had remained at the Tribune building, but Mike wasn't naive enough to believe they'd lost Reed's surveillance entirely. You're sure we weren't followed? Jennifer asked as they pulled up to the garage. Reasonably sure, Mike replied, killing the engine. But we'll take precautions anyway. Sarah opened the garage door remotely, allowing them to drive inside before it closed behind them. She greeted them at the interior door, a 9mm Glock holstered at her hip, not bothering to conceal it. Welcome to my humble abode, she said, eyes scanning Jennifer with professional assessment. You must be the daughter I've heard so much about. Jennifer's gaze flickered between the gun and Sarah's face. Funny, I've heard nothing about you. Jennifer, Mike warned, but Sarah just laughed. She's got your charm, Mike. Sarah extended her hand. Sarah Mitchell, I worked with your father at the Bureau. And before that, Mike added, she saved my ass in Basra. The interior of the house belied its unassuming exterior. The living room had been converted into a command center. Multiple computer monitors, communications equipment, and a large digital map of Boston dominated the space. Bobby sat at one of the workstations typing rapidly. He nodded in greeting but didn't pause his work. What is all this? Jennifer asked, taking in the operation with wide eyes. Dad, what have you gotten yourself into? It's more about what I got into 30 years ago, Mike replied, setting down her bag. And it's time you knew the truth. Mike gestured for Jennifer to take a seat at the kitchen table, where Jimmy was already waiting with a pot of coffee and a grim expression. For the next hour, Mike laid out the story of Operation Desert Hawk, not the sanitized version in the official records, but the ugly truth that had haunted him for decades. We were supposed to confirm the presence of chemical weapons and call in an airstrike, Mike explained. Standard up, but what we found wasn't just a weapons facility, it was a research lab. They were testing new compounds, experimental stuff. On human subjects, Jimmy added quietly. Prisoners mostly, some civilians. Jennifer's face paled. My God. Reed was our CIA liaison, Mike continued. When we reported what we'd found, he tried to shut us down, said it was sensitive and above our clearance, ordered us to forget what we'd seen and stick to the official mission parameters. Which was? Jennifer asked. Plant charges, destroy the facility, eliminate all evidence, Bobby called from his workstation. But you didn't, Jennifer guessed. Mike shook his head. We documented everything. Took photographs, samples. I sent a secure transmission directly to CENTCOM, bypassing Reed. 24 hours later, we were extracted and debriefed separately. The official report mentioned only conventional chemical weapons. Our evidence disappeared from the record. And Reed? Reported killed in action 2 weeks later, Jimmy said. Convenient. We were told to forget the whole thing, Mike finished. And for the most part, we did. Had to stay sane until now. Jennifer processed this information, her journalist mind connecting dots. So Phoenix Development isn't just a real estate company. Reed is what? Continuing his research? Eliminating witnesses? Both, we think, Sarah said, joining them at the table. The properties Phoenix acquires follow a pattern. They're not random investments. They're strategic positions. Bobby brought over a tablet displaying a map of Boston with dozens of properties highlighted in red. Each of these is owned by Phoenix or one of its subsidiaries. Notice anything? Jennifer studied the pattern, then looked up sharply. They surround military installations, research facilities, and transportation hubs. Smart girl, Bobby nodded approvingly. Perfect distribution network, Mike explained, for moving something without attracting attention. And perfect surveillance positions for gathering intelligence on military and research operations. You think they're still working with chemical weapons? Jennifer asked. Not just chemical, biological too, Sarah said grimly. Bobby, show her what you found. Bobby tapped his tablet, and the screen changed to display shipping manifests. Phoenix has been receiving specialized equipment through shell companies. Centrifuges, containment units, refrigerated storage designed for biological specimens. And people have been disappearing from their construction sites, Jennifer added, her reporter instincts kicking in. The workers I've been investigating, 3 in the past month, all undocumented immigrants. Mike exchanged a look with Sarah. Test subjects, he said quietly. The room fell silent as the full implications sank in. Outside, the winter wind howled through the pines, an eerie counterpoint to the darkness of their discussion. There's more, Mike finally said. Reed isn't working alone. His operation has international backing. Sarah took over. Anton Volkov, former KGB, now one of Russia's wealthiest oligarchs, specializes in weapons development and technology transfers. He and Reed have been meeting regularly for the past 6 months. The chemical research from Desert Hawk, Jennifer pieced together. Reed has continued it with Volkov's backing, and now they're moving to the next phase, whatever that is. Using Phoenix as cover, Mike confirmed. The real estate angle gives them legitimate reason to acquire strategic properties, move equipment and personnel without raising flags. Jennifer stood suddenly, pacing the kitchen. We need to expose this. I can write the story, get it out before they... No, Mike cut her off sharply. Absolutely not. That's exactly what would get you killed. But people need to know. And they will, Sarah interjected calmly. But we do this carefully. We gather concrete evidence, identify all players, and take it to people we can trust in the bureau and intelligence community. If there are any left who aren't compromised, Bobby muttered darkly. Jennifer turned to her father, frustration evident. So what's the plan? Hide here while Reed continues whatever he's doing? Mike shook his head. We're not hiding, we're preparing. Reed knows I remember him, knows I'm connecting the dots. He'll make a move soon. We need to be ready. And my story, the missing workers, is part of a much bigger story, Mike said gently. One we'll tell when the time is right. When we can do it without getting you or anyone else killed. Jennifer didn't look convinced, but she nodded reluctantly. So what now? Now, Mike said, we go on the offensive. Reed thinks he's hunting us. Time to show him what it feels like to be the prey. The Phoenix Development headquarters occupied a gleaming tower in downtown Boston, its sleek glass facade reflecting the cloudy January sky like a mirror. Mike sat in a nondescript sedan across the street, watching employees stream in and out through the revolving doors. In his ear, a tiny communicator kept him connected to the team. Target is on the move, Sarah's voice reported. Black Mercedes leaving the underground garage. I see it, Mike replied, starting his engine. Moving to follow. Bobby, you in position? Affirmative, came Bobby's response. Tracking device is active. I've got eyes on the digital map. The black Mercedes with its tinted windows and diplomatic plates pulled into traffic. Mike waited until it was 2 blocks ahead before following, maintaining a careful distance. Reed's routine was predictable. Morning meetings at headquarters, lunch at an exclusive club, afternoons at various development sites or government offices. Today, however, the Mercedes deviated from its usual pattern, heading toward the industrial district near the harbor. Mike's instincts hummed with alert focus. "He's heading to Blackwood Terminal," Bobby confirmed over the comm. "Sarah, you getting this?" "Roger that," Sarah replied. "Satellite imagery shows increased activity at the site over the past 48 hours. Multiple vehicles, personnel." "Something's happening," Mike muttered, more to himself than the team. "Bobby, how's your overwatch position?" "I've got clear sight lines to the main entrance and loading docks. If he goes inside, I'll lose visual, but the tracker will show his movement." The Blackwood Terminal had been Boston's primary shipping facility until newer, larger ports rendered it obsolete in the early 2000s. It had sat largely abandoned for years until Phoenix purchased it through a subsidiary, ostensibly for redevelopment. Mike parked several blocks away, continuing on foot through a maze of warehouses and empty lots. The winter chill bit through his coat, but he barely noticed, focused entirely on the mission at hand. "Reed's vehicle has stopped at the main administration building," Bobby reported. "He's got company. Second vehicle arriving now. Diplomatic plates. Russian consulate." "Volkov?" Mike asked. "Negative. Different vehicle. Likely his representative." Mike reached his observation position, an abandoned warehouse across from the terminal with a clear view of the main entrance. Through high-powered binoculars, he watched as Reed emerged from his Mercedes, accompanied by 2 security personnel. From the second vehicle, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s appeared, his bearing military despite the civilian clothes. "That's Viktor Petrov," Sarah identified through the comm. "Russian Cultural Attaché, SVR, almost certainly." "Reed and Petrov are heading inside," Mike narrated. "Security personnel maintaining perimeter positions. This isn't a casual meeting." For the next hour, Mike maintained his surveillance, documenting movements, photographing vehicles and personnel. The activity around the terminal increased as the afternoon progressed. Unmarked vans arriving, workers unloading crates into the main warehouse, security patrols circulating with trained precision. "Mike, you need to see this," Sarah's voice carried an unusual urgency. "I've hacked into their communication system. They're discussing a shipment arriving tonight, referred to as Chimera Protocol." Chimera? The code name triggered a cold recognition. That was the designation for the experimental compounds we found in Basra. Biological agents designed to target specific genetic markers. "Jesus," Bobby breathed over the comm. "They're actually doing it, continuing the research, moving to deployment." "We need to get inside," Mike decided. "See exactly what they're planning." "Too risky in daylight," Sarah cautioned. "Their security is professional grade. Wait until tonight when the shipment arrives. We'll have better cover and their attention will be divided." Mike reluctantly agreed. "I'll maintain position until dusk, then withdraw." "Bobby, how's your—" He stopped mid-sentence as something caught his eye. A familiar figure had emerged from the administration building, walking alongside Reed. Not Petrov, but someone Mike hadn't expected to see here. Thomas Matthews, Assistant Director of the FBI's Boston Field Office, Mike's former superior. "Sarah, are you seeing this?" Mike asked quietly. "I see it," she confirmed, her voice tight. "Matthews is dirty." The implications cascaded through Mike's mind. If Matthews was compromised, their options for official help narrowed dramatically. The corruption reached higher than they'd imagined. "Change of plans," Mike decided. "We can't wait. Whatever's happening tonight involves federal cooperation at the highest levels. We need evidence now, something concrete enough to take to people we can trust." "Mike, don't be reckless," Sarah warned. "We need more intel, more preparation." But Mike was already moving, his decision made. Sometimes the only way through was forward. "I'm going in. Bobby, create a distraction at the east perimeter in 5 minutes. Sarah, stand by to extract if needed." "Damn it, Mike," Bobby growled, but Mike could hear him already preparing. "Just like Basra, always charging in." "It worked then," Mike replied grimly. "We lost Jackson and Reeves in Basra," Bobby reminded him. "And we'll lose more if we don't stop whatever's happening tonight," Mike countered. 5 minutes, East perimeter. Make it good. Mike circled around to the harbor side of the terminal, where security was lighter. The afternoon shadows lengthened as clouds gathered overhead, promising snow by evening. He used the growing darkness to his advantage, moving silently from cover to cover. At precisely the 5-minute mark, a series of explosions echoed from the eastern fence line. Bobby's distraction, likely improvised from materials in his truck. Security personnel rushed toward the commotion, leaving the loading dock momentarily unguarded. Mike seized his opportunity, sprinting across the open space and slipping inside the warehouse through a service entrance. The interior was cavernous, filled with shipping containers and heavy equipment. Voices echoed from somewhere deeper inside. Moving quietly, Mike navigated through the maze of containers, following the sounds of activity. He found a concealed observation point behind a stack of crates and settled in to watch and listen. In the center of the warehouse, a clinical area had been established. Sterile workbenches, specialized equipment, computer stations. Workers in laboratory coats moved purposefully around refrigerated containers marked with biohazard symbols. At the heart of it all stood Reed, Petrov, and Matthews, examining what appeared to be research documents. The genetic markers are stable, Reed was explaining. The delivery system works exactly as designed. Host-to-host transmission is limited to direct contact, preventing uncontrolled spread. And the targeting parameters? Petrov asked, his accent thick but his English precise. As specified, Reed assured him, the compound will only affect individuals with the designated genetic profile. Everyone else will experience mild flu-like symptoms at worst. And deployment locations, Matthews inquired. Reed gestured to a digital map displayed on a nearby screen. 08 major cities using our established distribution network. Phoenix properties provide perfect cover, legitimate businesses with high foot traffic. The aerosol dispersal units will be disguised as standard HVAC equipment. Mike felt ice form in his veins. They were planning a biological attack. Not indiscriminate, but targeted against specific genetic profiles. Ethnic cleansing disguised as a natural outbreak. He needed evidence. Carefully, he extracted a specialized phone from his pocket, one of Bobby's modified devices with enhanced camera capabilities and secure transmission protocols. He began documenting everything, capturing images of the operation, the equipment, the principles involved. Deployment timeline remains as scheduled? Matthews asked. 72 hours, Reed confirmed. The first phase begins tomorrow night with the Boston test site. Mike had heard enough. He needed to get this information back to the team, formulate a response before it was too late. Slowly, he began to retreat, careful to maintain his concealment. Then disaster struck. His comm unit, previously silent, suddenly crackled to life with Sarah's voice. Too loud in the cavernous space. Mike, you need to extract immediately. Security is returning to your position. The sound, though brief, echoed enough to draw attention. One of the security personnel turned sharply, scanning the warehouse. We have a breach, the guard announced, drawing his weapon. Perimeter Section C. Reed's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Find them, he ordered. No one leaves. Mike abandoned stealth for speed, racing back through the container maze toward the service entrance. Behind him, shouts and footsteps indicated pursuit. He reached the door, only to find it now guarded by 2 armed men. Changing direction, he headed for a frayed elevator he'd noted earlier. If he could reach the upper level, he might find another exit point. The elevator door stood open, waiting. As he sprinted the final distance, a security guard appeared suddenly from between containers, blocking his path. The man reacted with professional speed, reaching for his weapon. Mike was faster. Decades of training and instinct took over as he closed the distance. A precise strike to the guard's wrist prevented him from drawing his gun. A second blow to the solar plexus doubled him over. The third, an elbow to the base of the skull, rendered him unconscious. The entire encounter lasted less than 3 seconds. Mike dragged the unconscious guard into the elevator, hit the button for the top floor, then slipped out before the doors closed, sending security on a false trail while he sought another escape route. Bobby, I need extraction, he whispered into his comm. South loading dock, 2 minutes. On my way, Bobby replied tersely. What the hell happened in there? I'll explain later. They're planning an attack. Biological agent targeted at specific genetic profiles. Jesus Christ. Mike reached the south loading dock, only to find it sealed by a rolling metal door too heavy to lift manually. He was trapped, with security closing in from multiple directions. Then he heard it, the distinctive engine of Bobby's truck, followed by a tremendous crash as the vehicle smashed through the dock door. The metal barrier crumpled inward, creating an opening just large enough for a person to squeeze through. "Come on," Bobby shouted from the driver's seat. Mike didn't hesitate, diving through the gap and into the truck's passenger seat. Bobby gunned the engine, tires screaming as they accelerated away from the terminal. Gunfire erupted behind them, security personnel firing from the loading dock. Bullets pinged off the truck's frame and shattered the rear window. "Down!" Bobby yelled, and Mike ducked as more rounds tore through the cab. Bobby swerved violently, taking them around a corner and out of the line of fire. His face was a mask of concentration as he navigated the industrial maze at dangerous speed, putting distance between them and their pursuers. "You hit?" he asked, eyes never leaving the road. Mike did a quick self-assessment. "Negative, you?" "Grazed, nothing serious." Blood seeped through Bobby's left sleeve, but his driving remained steady. "Sarah, we're clear of the terminal," Mike reported into his comm, "heading to extraction point Alpha." Static answered him. Bobby swore. "They're jamming communications," he explained. "Started right after I broke through the door." "Get us back to the safe house," Mike instructed. "We need to warn the others." "If they're jamming us, they might have located the safe house too," Bobby warned. "Reed has resources we can only guess at." Mike's thoughts turned immediately to Jennifer. "Drive faster." The safe house was eerily quiet when they arrived, no lights visible through the windows. Mike's hand went instinctively to the weapon concealed beneath his coat, a Sig Sauer P226 that had been his service weapon during his FBI days. "Stay in the truck," he told Bobby. "Be ready to move fast if this goes south." "Like hell," Bobby replied, drawing his own weapon. "We go in together." They approached cautiously, using the tree line for cover. No movement was visible inside or around the property. The garage door stood partially open, a bad sign. Mike signaled to Bobby, and they split up, approaching the house from different angles. At Mike's count of 3, they converged on the front and rear entrances simultaneously. The interior was dark, but nothing appeared disturbed. No signs of struggle or forced entry. Mike moved through the living room, noting that the computer equipment remained untouched. The kitchen was similarly undisturbed. "Clear," Bobby called from the bedrooms. "Clear here too," Mike responded, lowering his weapon slightly. "But where is everyone?" A faint noise from outside caught his attention, the soft crunch of tires on gravel. Mike moved to the window, peering carefully around the curtain edge. Sarah's SUV pulled into the driveway, headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. She emerged from the driver's seat with Jennifer safe beside her. Mike felt a wave of relief so intense it nearly buckled his knees. He stepped onto the porch as they approached, holstering his weapon. "What happened? Why did you leave?" "Standard protocol," Sarah explained. "When communications went dark, I assumed the worst. Got Jennifer to safety, then circled back to make sure we weren't followed before returning." Jennifer rushed forward, embracing her father with unexpected fierceness. "I thought you were dead," she whispered. "Not yet," Mike replied, returning the embrace. "But we've got bigger problems." Inside, Mike relayed what he'd discovered at the terminal, showing them the images he'd captured on the specialized phone. Sarah's face grew increasingly grave as he described the Chimera protocol. "Targeted biological weapon," she said, studying the images of the research area. "Designed to affect only certain genetic profiles while leaving others unharmed." "Ethnic bioweapon," Bobby elaborated, his voice tight with controlled anger. "The holy grail of biological warfare. Plausible deniability built right in. Looks like a natural outbreak that happens to affect only certain populations." "And they're planning to release it in 8 cities, Mike finished, starting with Boston tomorrow night. Jennifer, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "The Phoenix properties, the pattern we saw on the map, those aren't just surveillance positions. They're release points. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. Thousands of lives at stake, perhaps hundreds of thousands if the weapon spread as designed. We need to take this to the authorities," Jennifer insisted. "Which authorities?" Bobby countered bitterly. "We just saw the assistant director of the FBI's Boston office conspiring with Reed. Who exactly do you suggest we trust?" "Not everyone is corrupt," Sarah reasoned. There are still good people in the Bureau in Homeland Security. But how do we identify them in time, Mike asked. We have less than 24 hours before the first deployment. The room fell silent as each person wrestled with the impossible equation. Too little time, too few resources, too many unknowns. Finally, Mike straightened, decision made. We handle this ourselves, direct action. What are you suggesting? Sarah asked carefully. We hit the terminal tonight, destroy the research, the samples, the delivery systems, everything. Bobby nodded slowly. Could work. I've got enough equipment in my truck to make a statement they won't ignore. That's insane, Jennifer protested. You're talking about what, a commando raid? The four of us against professional security? Three, Sarah corrected. You're staying here. Jennifer bristled. The hell I am. This is the biggest story of... This isn't about your story, Mike cut her off sharply. This is about stopping a mass casualty attack before it happens. And what's your plan for after? Jennifer demanded. If you succeed, you've just declared war on Reed, Volkov, and God knows who else. If you fail, you're either dead or in prison for terrorism. She has a point, Sarah admitted. We need leverage, insurance, something to keep them from coming after us when this is done. Mike considered this. The evidence. Everything I gathered, plus whatever we can document tonight. We package it, encrypt it, set it to release automatically to multiple agencies and news outlets if anything happens to any of us. Dead man's switch, Bobby nodded approvingly. Classic. I can set that up, Jennifer volunteered, her reporter's instincts engaging with the problem. I have contacts at every major news organization, plus secure channels to several editors who would run with this story, no questions asked. Mike studied his daughter, seeing not just Caroline's features, but her determination, her courage. She had grown into a formidable woman while he was busy chasing shadows from the past. All right, he agreed. You handle the insurance policy, but you stay here while we hit the terminal. Jennifer opened her mouth to protest, but Sarah cut her off. It's not negotiable. We need someone alive and free if this goes wrong. Someone who knows the whole story and can make sure it gets told. The logic was unassailable. Jennifer reluctantly nodded her agreement. As they began planning the operation in detail, Mike's phone vibrated with an incoming text. He glanced at the screen and froze. What is it? Sarah asked, noticing his reaction. Mike held up the phone so they could all see the message from an unknown number. Terminal surveillance shows you took quite an interest in our operation today. We should discuss this, civilized men. Alone, Ban, the Harborview Hotel, Suite 1214, 9 p.m. Come unarmed if you want answers about Basra. Reed. It's a trap, Bobby said immediately. Obviously, Sarah agreed. They want to eliminate you before you can act on what you've learned. Mike stared at the message, thoughts racing. Or it's an opportunity. Reed wants to talk. That means he's worried about what I know, what I might do with that information. You can't seriously be considering going, Jennifer protested. Actually, I am, Mike replied. If I can keep Reed occupied, focused on me, it gives you a better chance at the terminal. Absolutely not, Bobby objected. We do this together or not at all. Think strategically, Mike countered. Reed expects me to show up alone. He'll have security, but not an army. He won't want to attract attention in a luxury hotel. Meanwhile, the terminal security will be focused on preventing another breach like today. They won't expect a coordinated attack with multiple operators. Sarah and Bobby exchanged glances, their decades of field experience allowing them to evaluate the tactical logic. It could work, Sarah admitted reluctantly. Classic misdirection. Keep the primary threat focused on one location while striking another. But if something goes wrong at either location, Bobby left the thought unfinished. Then Jennifer releases everything, Mike completed, and Reed, Volkov, and their entire operation burn. The weight of decisions settled over the room. They were four people, three aging former operatives and one journalist, planning to stop an international conspiracy backed by billions of dollars in government connections. The odds were nearly impossible, but they had faced impossible odds before. Set up the dead man's switch, Mike instructed Jennifer. Sarah, Bobby, prepare for the terminal operation. I need to get ready to meet Reed. As the others dispersed to their tasks, Jennifer caught her father's arm. "Dad, wait." He turned, seeing the fear and determination warring in her eyes. "I need you to promise me something," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion beneath. "Promise you will come back." Mike wanted to make that promise. More than anything, he wanted to assure his daughter that after tonight, they would have time to rebuild what years of distance had eroded between them. But he wouldn't lie to her. "I'll do everything in my power," he said instead. Jennifer held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. "That'll have to do." Outside, the first snowflakes of evening began to fall, coating the world in a deceptive blanket of purity. But beneath that pristine surface, a storm was gathering. One that would either wash away decades of corruption and conspiracy or bury them all beneath its fury. Mike checked his watch. 3 hours until he faced Reed. 3 hours until the past and present collided in a reckoning long overdue. The Harborview Hotel rose like a glass monument against Boston's night skyline, its upper floors disappearing into the low-hanging clouds. Snow fell steadily now, transforming the city into a hushed landscape of white. Mike stood across the street, watching the play of lights and shadows, calculating his approach. He was technically unarmed, having left his Sig Sauer with Bobby, but Mike Harrington had never truly been unarmed a day in his adult life. His body itself was a weapon, honed through decades of training and combat experience. And concealed in his jacket pocket was a tactical pen, innocuous enough to pass a casual search, lethal in the right hands. His phone vibrated with an incoming text from Sarah. "Terminal approach underway. Clock starts now." Mike checked his watch, 8:55 p.m., right on schedule. He crossed the street, moving with the confident stride of someone who belonged among the hotel's wealthy clientele, despite his modest attire. The lobby gleamed with marble and brass, a cathedral to capitalism, where the well-heeled gathered beneath crystal chandeliers. The front desk staff barely glanced at him as he headed for the elevator bank. Another businessman on another meeting. "Going up, sir?" asked the elevator attendant, an older man with the practiced smile of someone who had been opening doors for the privileged his entire life. 12, Mike replied, stepping into the polished brass cabin. As the elevator ascended, Mike centered himself, focusing his mind the way he had before countless operations. His breathing slowed, his senses sharpened. He was no longer an aging lawyer with a complicated past. He was what he had always been beneath a civilized veneer, a predator. The elevator doors opened silently on the 12th floor. The corridor stretched before him, thickly carpeted to muffle footsteps. Suite 1214 waited at the end, double doors suggesting the luxury within. Mike noted the security camera above the elevator, its red light blinking steadily. Reed would already know he had arrived. 2 men in dark suits stood outside the suite, their postures revealing military training despite their civilian attire. They straightened as Mike approached. "I'm expected," he said simply. The taller guard nodded, opening a handheld metal detector. "Arms up, please." Mike complied, allowing the perfunctory search. The tactical pen wasn't flagged. Either their equipment wasn't sensitive enough, or they weren't looking for something so innocuous. "He's clean," the guard confirmed, opening the door. The suite beyond was opulent, a spacious living area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace, casting dancing shadows across leather furniture and abstract art. At the center of the room, Alexander Reed stood waiting, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. "Harrington," he greeted, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Punctual as ever. Please, come in." Mike stepped inside, hearing the door close behind him. They were alone, or appeared to be. He had no doubt that the guards remained just outside, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. "Drink?" Reed offered, gesturing to a well-stocked bar cart. "I'll pass," Mike replied, remaining standing. "I didn't come here for hospitality." Reed smiled thinly. "No, you came for answers. About Basra." He moved to a leather armchair, sitting with the casual grace of a man accustomed to power. "Please sit. We have much to discuss, and I prefer civilization to standoffs." Mike chose a position that kept both Reed and the door in his line of sight. "You've gone to considerable trouble to eliminate witnesses to what happened in Basra. Why the change of heart now?" "Because you're not just any witness, Michael. You're the one who sent that unauthorized transmission to CENTCOM, the one who nearly derailed decades of critical research. Reed sipped his drink. And now you're the one threatening to expose Chimera before its deployment. That makes you unique. Unique enough to talk to rather than kill outright, Mike observed. Precisely. Reed set his glass down on a side table. I've always respected your abilities, even while disagreeing with your moral inflexibility. Is that what you call opposing the use of human test subjects for biological weapons? Mike's voice remained even, but the contempt was unmistakable. Reed sighed as if disappointed by a promising student's poor performance. You still don't understand the bigger picture. What we found in Basra wasn't just a rogue program, it was the future. Targeted bioweapons that can eliminate specific threats while leaving civilian populations intact. The holy grail of warfare. Ethnic cleansing disguised as natural disease. Precision elimination of hostile elements, Reed corrected smoothly. Think of the applications, Michael. No more carpet bombing, no more collateral damage. Just surgical removal of threats based on their genetic markers. And who decides which genetic markers constitute a threat? Mike challenged. You, Volkov? Some shadow committee playing God with entire populations? Reed leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with something like evangelical fervor. That's why I wanted to speak with you. You're still thinking in obsolete frameworks, nations, armies, traditional warfare. The world has changed, the threats have evolved. Our defenses must evolve too. Cut the sales pitch, Mike interrupted. You're planning to release this weapon in American cities, starting with Boston, tomorrow night. If Reed was surprised by Mike's knowledge, he didn't show it. A limited deployment, a demonstration of capability, nothing more. For who? Your Russian partners? For everyone who needs to understand the new reality. Reed stood, moving to the window. The old powers are fading, Michael. America, Russia, China, dinosaurs who don't realize they're already extinct. The future belongs to those with the vision and will to shape it. And the profit motive to fund it, Mike added dryly. Reed turned, his expression hardening slightly. Don't be naive. Power has always required resources. Volkov understands this. So do others who have invested in our work. Others like Assistant Director Matthews? This time, Reed couldn't quite hide his surprise. You've been busy. I've been thorough, Mike corrected. Just like in Basra. And look where that got you, Reed countered. 30 years later, still chasing ghosts, still fighting battles no one else remembers. What did your dedication cost you, Michael? Your marriage? Your relationship with your daughter? For what? The words struck uncomfortably close to home, but Mike kept his expression neutral. Better than selling my soul for a corner office and blood money. Reed laughed, the sound devoid of humor. Always the righteous warrior. That's why I respected you, even while having you sidelined after Basra. You truly believe in something larger than yourself. He returned to his chair. Which brings me to why you're here. I assumed it was to keep me occupied while your people dealt with me permanently. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have made it to the elevator, Reed dismissed. No, I have a proposition for you. Mike raised an eyebrow, saying nothing. Join us, Reed said simply. Bring your expertise, your connections, your moral authority to our organization. Help guide the application of these technologies. Be the conscience you believe we lack. For a moment, Mike simply stared, the offer so unexpected it temporarily derailed his thoughts. You're serious, he finally said. Entirely. Reed leaned forward. The deployment is happening with or without you, Michael. The technology exists, the infrastructure is in place. The only question is, who shapes its use going forward? And if I refuse? Reed's expression turned regretful. Then we proceed as planned, and you become another casualty of progress, along with anyone who assisted you in your investigations. The implicit threat to Jennifer, to his friends, hung in the air between them. You've made similar offers before, Mike observed, to David Chen, to others who discovered pieces of your operation. And they refused, to their detriment. Reed didn't bother denying it. You're different. You understand the stakes. You've seen war up close. You know sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater good. Mike studied the man across from him. this polished, articulate monster who spoke of mass murder in terms of progress and necessity. In another lifetime, Reed might have been a respected statesman, his sociopathy mistaken for vision, his cruelty for strength. "How much time do I have to decide?" Mike asked, his voice carefully calibrated to suggest consideration rather than outright rejection. Reed smiled, satisfaction evident. "Not as much as I'd like to give you. The deployment timeline is fixed. Say, until midnight." Mike checked his watch. Just over 2 hours. Sarah and Bobby would be well into their operation at the terminal by now. He needed to keep Reed talking, keep him distracted. "Tell me more about Chimera," he requested, settling back in his chair. "If I'm to consider your offer, I need to understand exactly what I'd be involving myself with." Reed's eyes lit with the peculiar enthusiasm of a true believer. It's remarkable technology, decades ahead of anything officially acknowledged. As Reed launched into a detailed explanation of the Chimera protocol, Mike listened with half an ear, his mind tracking the minutes ticking away, wondering how Sarah and Bobby were faring at the terminal. The Blackwood terminal loomed dark against the snowy night, its abandoned warehouses and rusting equipment creating a post-apocalyptic landscape at the harbor's edge. From their concealed position 200 yards away, Sarah surveyed the complex through night vision binoculars. "Security is heavier than this afternoon," she reported quietly. "4-man teams patrolling the perimeter, rotations every 15 minutes, additional guards at all entry points." Beside her, Bobby nodded, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. "They're expecting company." "They're expecting Mike," Sarah corrected. "Not us, not from this approach." Their plan was simple but dangerous. Infiltrate the facility, locate the Chimera bioweapons, destroy them and all research data, then extract before security could respond effectively. Simple in concept, near impossible in execution. Bobby checked his equipment one final time. Compact charges, remote detonators, the specialized tools of demolition he hadn't touched in years, but still handled with the easy confidence of muscle memory. "Primary target is the refrigerated storage containers we saw in Mike's photos," Sarah reminded him. "Secondary targets are the computer systems and research stations. If we can't secure the samples for proper disposal, we destroy everything." "Scorched earth," Bobby confirmed grimly. "Just like old times." Sarah activated her encrypted comlink. "Jennifer, status check." From the safe house miles away, Jennifer's voice came through clearly. "All systems operational. Dead man's switch is active and programmed. If you don't check in every 30 minutes, the full dossier goes to every contact on my list." "Copy that. We're moving in. Radio silence unless emergency." "Understood. Be careful." Sarah exchanged a look with Bobby. Both understood the odds they faced. Both accepted them without hesitation. "Remember," Sarah said softly, "we're not just doing this for Mike or for ourselves. We're doing it for everyone who would be targeted by Chimera, for everyone who was tortured in that facility in Basra." Bobby nodded once, his weathered face solemn in the moonlight. "For Jackson and Reeves, for all of them." They moved out, utilizing the cover of darkness and falling snow to approach the perimeter fence. Sarah led the way, her movements fluid despite her 50 years, decades of training overriding the protests of aging joints. The fence presented their first challenge, 10 feet of chain link topped with razor wire, with electronic sensors at regular intervals. Bobby produced a specialized cutting tool designed to slice through metal without triggering vibration sensors. "New toy?" Sarah whispered as he worked. "Christmas gift to myself," he replied with the ghost of a smile. They created an opening just large enough to slip through, careful to avoid disturbing the snow pattern more than necessary. Once inside the perimeter, they paused, listening for any sign their intrusion had been detected. Nothing but the distant sound of waves against the harbor walls and the soft hiss of falling snow. They proceeded according to the map they'd memorized from satellite imagery. Staying in the shadows of abandoned equipment and empty containers. The main warehouse, their target, stood 300 yards ahead, illuminated by security lights that created pools of harsh brightness in the surrounding darkness. A patrol rounded the corner ahead. Sarah and Bobby froze, pressing themselves against a rusting crane base. Two armed men passed within 20 feet, their breath visible in the cold, weapon straps creaking softly with each step. When the patrol had passed, they continued their approach, each step measured, each movement calculated to minimize noise and visibility. At the warehouse's service entrance, Bobby produced a small electronic device and attached it to the keypad lock. The display flickered as the device cycled through possible combinations. After 30 seconds, the lock disengaged with a soft click. "Still got it," Bobby murmured. Sarah took point, easing the door open just enough to slip inside. The warehouse interior was dimly lit, with most activity concentrated in the central area they had seen in Mike's photographs. From their position near the wall, they could see laboratory equipment, computer stations, and the critical refrigeration units containing the biological agents. 6 hostiles visible, Sarah counted. 2 researchers, 4 security. More in the adjacent offices, Bobby added, gesturing to a glass-walled section where shadows moved behind frosted panels. "We need a distraction," Sarah decided. "Something to draw security away from the primary target." Bobby reached into his pack, producing a small metallic sphere. "Old school. Timer activated, non-lethal concussive charge. Set it off in the loading bay. It'll sound like a vehicle explosion." "Do it," Sarah confirmed. "I'll move on the primary target once security responds." Bobby slipped away, moving with surprising stealth for a man his size. Sarah remained in position, mentally reviewing the approach she would take once the distraction occurred. The path to the refrigeration units, the time needed to plant charges, the extraction route. 3 minutes later, a tremendous boom echoed from the far side of the warehouse. The concussion rattled the walls, sending dust drifting down from overhead beams. Alarms immediately began wailing as security personnel raced toward the source of the explosion, shouting instructions and drawing weapons. The moment the central area cleared, Sarah moved. Staying low, she sprinted across the open space to the refrigeration units. Each was marked with biohazard symbols and labeled Chimera Era 1 through Chimera Era 8. One for each target city, she realized. Working quickly, she attached compact charges to each unit, setting the remote detonator. Next, she moved to the computer stations, inserting a specialized drive that would extract data before wiping the systems completely. "Primary charges set," she reported into her comm. "Data extraction in progress. 60 seconds to completion." "Secondary charges set at power junction and backup generators," Bobby replied. "Ready for extraction on your mark." The data extraction completed with a soft beep. Sarah pocketed the drive, then turned to make her exit, and froze. Standing 10 feet away was Assistant Director Thomas Matthews, a pistol leveled directly at her chest. "Agent Mitchell," he said, his voice professionally calm. "I wish I could say I was surprised." Sarah kept her hands visible, mind racing through options. "Matthews, I thought bureaucratic corruption would have softened you by now." "Not all of us lose our edge behind a desk." He gestured with the gun. "Hands on your head, slowly." Sarah complied while subtly pressing a hidden button on her watch, the emergency signal to Bobby. "Where's Harrington?" Matthews demanded. "I know he's involved in this." "Harrington?" Sarah feigned confusion. "I haven't seen Mike in years. This is personal. Revenge for what you people did in Basra." Matthews studied her with cold eyes. "You expect me to believe you're operating alone?" "Check the charges," Sarah challenged. "Standard agency training, standard agency equipment. I never turned in all my toys when I retired." As Matthews' gaze flickered briefly toward the refrigeration units, Sarah made her move. A swift kick knocked his gun hand upward, sending his shot into the ceiling. She followed with a precision strike to his solar plexus, doubling him over, then a disabling blow to his knee. Matthews went down hard but managed to trigger an alarm on his radio before Sarah could stop him. Immediately, shouts and footsteps indicated security returning to the central area. "Extraction compromised," Sarah reported into her comm. "Executing emergency protocol." "On my way," Bobby replied tersely. Sarah drew her own weapon, a compact 9mm with suppressor, and moved toward the exit route they'd planned. She made it halfway before security personnel flooded into the central area, weapons raised. "Freeze! Hands where we can see them!" Sarah dove behind an equipment cart as gunfire erupted, bullets pinging off metal and shattering glassware. She returned fire selectively, aiming to disable rather than kill. These were hired guns, not the architects of Chimera. From the opposite side of the warehouse came another explosion. Bobby's diversion. The lights flickered and died, plunging the space into darkness broken only by emergency lighting. In the confusion, Sarah made her move, sprinting toward their extraction point. She was halfway there when searing pain tore through her left shoulder, a bullet finding its mark. She stumbled but kept moving, her training overriding the shock and pain. Bobby appeared from the shadows, laying down, covering fire with practiced precision. "Go," he shouted. "I'll hold them here." "Not without you," Sarah insisted, taking position beside him. "One of us has to make it out with that data," Bobby argued. "You're hit, I'm not. Simple math." Before Sarah could protest further, Bobby pressed the detonator for the secondary charges into her hand. "Get to the fence line, then trigger it. Should cover your extraction." Their eyes met in the dim emergency lighting, decades of friendship, of shared danger and trust, communicated in a single glance. "Tell Mike I went out like a pro," Bobby said, his voice gruff with emotion barely contained. "Now go." "That's an order, Agent Mitchell." Sarah hesitated only a moment longer, then nodded once, a soldier's acknowledgement of necessary sacrifice. She turned and ran for the exit, Bobby's covering fire keeping pursuit at bay. She made it to the perimeter fence, blood now soaking her jacket from the shoulder wound. Looking back at the warehouse, she saw Bobby's position surrounded, muzzle flashes illuminating the darkness as he held off security forces. "Forgive me, old friend," she whispered, and pressed the detonator. The warehouse erupted in a synchronized series of explosions. The charges on the refrigeration units first, then the secondary explosions at power junctions and fuel supplies. The night sky bloomed orange as flames engulfed the structure, illuminating the falling snow like embers. Sarah cut through the fence with her remaining strength and staggered toward their emergency extraction vehicle, hidden half a mile away. She had the data, she had completed the mission, but the cost had been higher than any of them had anticipated. As she drove away from the inferno, tears mixed with the blood on her face. Bobby Thompson had died as he had lived, a warrior to the end. In the Harborview Hotel suite, Reed's detailed exposition of the Chimera Protocol was interrupted by an urgent tone from his phone. He glanced at the screen, his composed facade cracking for the first time as his eyes widened in shock. "What is it?" Mike asked, already guessing the answer. "It seems your friends have been busy," Reed replied, his voice tight with controlled fury. "The terminal's under attack." Mike allowed himself a small smile. "Right on schedule." Reed's expression shifted from shock to cold calculation as he studied Mike anew. "A distraction. You never intended to consider my offer." "Not for a second," Mike confirmed, rising from his chair. "You're a mass murderer, Reed. Nothing more, nothing less." Reed pressed a button on his phone. "You've made a grave miscalculation, Harrington. Your friends may have damaged the facility, but Chimera exists in multiple locations. The deployment will proceed." "Not if the evidence my daughter is preparing to release has anything to say about it," Mike countered. "Complete dossiers on you, Volkov, Matthews, the entire operation. Set to release automatically if any of us fails to check in." The door opened as the two security guards entered, weapons drawn. "Kill him," Reed ordered calmly, turning back toward the window. The guards advanced, but Mike was already in motion. Decades of training and muscle memory took over as he executed a fluid Krav Maga sequence, a precise strike to the first guard's wrist that sent his weapon clattering to the floor, followed by a disabling blow to the nerve cluster at the base of his neck. The second guard managed to fire once, the bullet grazing Mike's side as he closed the distance between them. Mike seized the man's gun arm, using his own momentum to slam him into the wall with enough force to crack the plaster. A final strike rendered him unconscious. The entire exchange lasted less than 10 seconds. Reed had turned back from the window, his own weapon now drawn, a compact automatic that looked almost delicate in his manicured hand. "Impressive for a man your age," he acknowledged, "but ultimately futile." "Maybe," Mike conceded, blood beginning to soak through his shirt where the bullet had grazed him. "But I've accomplished what I came here to do." "Buying time for your friends at the terminal?" Reed's smile was cold. Reports indicate one of them is already dead, the other wounded and fleeing. Their attack failed to destroy all the Chimera samples or research data. Mike felt ice form in his veins at the news of a casualty, but maintained his composure. And yet, here we are. You with a gun, me unarmed. If their attack failed, why are you so rattled? Precaution, nothing more. Reed's finger tightened on the trigger. You always were a worthy adversary, Harrington. In another life, we might have accomplished remarkable things together. In another life, you might have been human, Mike replied. Reed's expression hardened. Goodbye, Mish. The suite door exploded inward with a splintering crash, interrupting Reed mid-sentence. Through the shattered doorway stepped Jennifer, a police-issue shotgun braced against her shoulder. Get away from my father, she commanded, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Reed recovered quickly, swinging his weapon toward the new threat. Miss Harrington, how unexpected. Mike saw what was about to happen with crystal clarity. Reed would shoot Jennifer before she could react, her inexperience with firearms evident in her stance. There was no time for words, only action. He launched himself across the room with explosive power, every muscle and sinew committed to a single purpose, reaching Reed before his finger could complete its squeeze on the trigger. As he closed the distance, Reed's attention split between the two threats. His shot went wide, missing Jennifer by inches as Mike slammed into him with the full force of his body. They crashed into the window, the impact spiderwebbing the glass but not breaking it. Reed fought with surprising strength, his CIA training evident in his movements. His gun hand was pinned, but his free hand found Mike's wounded side, fingers digging into the bullet graze with calculated cruelty. Pain exploded through Mike's consciousness, momentarily weakening his grip. Reed seized the advantage, breaking free and bringing his weapon to bear once more. That's when Jennifer fired. The shotgun blast caught Reed in the shoulder, spinning him around and shattering the already weakened window. For a surreal moment, he seemed suspended against the night sky, snow swirling around his silhouette. Then gravity claimed him, and he plummeted into the darkness. Dad! Jennifer dropped the shotgun, rushing to her father's side. Mike was on his knees, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. I'm all right, he assured her, his voice rough with pain and exertion. Just a graze. Jennifer helped him to his feet, her face pale but determined. We need to go. Hotel security will be here any second. Sarah? Mike asked as they made their way to the emergency stairwell. Bobby? Jennifer's expression told him everything before she spoke. Sarah contacted me from the extraction vehicle. She's wounded but alive. Bobby didn't make it out. Mike closed his eyes briefly, grief threatening to overwhelm him. Bobby Thompson, friend, brother-in-arm, one of the finest men he'd ever known, gone. Another name added to the list of those lost to secrets and shadows. Sarah has the data, Jennifer continued as they descended the stairs. And Reed was lying. Their mission was successful. All the Chimera samples were destroyed, along with most of the research data. What little survived, Sarah has secured. They reached the service exit at the basement level, emerging into the snowy night through a loading dock. Jennifer had parked a nondescript sedan nearby, untraceable, rented under a false identity with cash. She'd learned quickly. As they drove away from the hotel, police and emergency vehicles converged on the scene, lights flashing against the falling snow. Reed? Mike asked. I don't know, Jennifer admitted. It was 12 stories, but men like Reed have a way of surviving, Mike finished grimly. We need to assume he's alive until proven otherwise. Mike's intuition proved correct. As paramedics worked to stabilize Reed on the pavement below the hotel, the severely injured man was already planning his next move. The fall had been partially broken by the hotel's decorative awning, resulting in multiple fractures and internal injuries, but not the death that should have been certain from such a height. Like the cockroach he resembled in moral character, Alexander Reed had an unnatural talent for survival. They drove in silence for several minutes, the weight of the night's events settling around them like the snow accumulating on the city streets. I never fired a gun before tonight, Jennifer finally said, her voice small in the darkness of the car. I just knew. I couldn't let him kill you. Mike reached across the console, taking her hand in his. You saved my life, and possibly thousands of others. What happens now, with the evidence, with all of it? Now we finish what we started, Mike replied, his voice strengthening with resolve. Sarah's wounded but alive. She has the data. Between that and what you've prepared for release, we have everything needed to expose the entire operation. Reed, Volkov, Matthews, all of them. But Reed said Chimera exists in multiple locations, Jennifer pointed out, and he has powerful allies, government connections, which is why we need to release everything immediately, Mike decided. No holding back, no insurance policy. We put it all out there through every channel you have. Make it too big to cover up, too public to deny. Jennifer nodded slowly. I can do that. I have contacts at the Tribune, the Post, the Times, and secure channels to several editors who would run with this story, no questions asked. Good, and we need to warn the other target cities. Sarah's data should contain that information. They reached the outskirts of town where they had arranged to meet Sarah at a secondary safe house, a cabin owned by a friend of Bobby's, off the grid and difficult to trace. Sarah's vehicle was already there, parked haphazardly as if the driver had been in a hurry or injured. Mike felt a renewed surge of worry as they pulled up beside it. Inside the cabin, they found Sarah slumped at a small kitchen table, her shoulder bandaged crudely, blood seeping through the makeshift dressing. Her face was gray with pain and blood loss, but her eyes remained alert and determined. Took you long enough, she greeted them, her voice weak but resolute. Jennifer immediately moved to check her wound while Mike secured the cabin, drawing curtains and checking sight lines from each window. Bobby? He asked simply when he'd finished. Sarah's eyes glistened in the dim light. He stayed behind so I could get out with the data. Classic Bobby, stubborn to the end. Mike nodded, grief a physical weight in his chest. He always said he'd go out in a blaze of glory. Probably wouldn't have wanted it any other way. Doesn't make it easier, Sarah replied softly. No, Mike agreed. It doesn't. Jennifer finished redressing Sarah's wound with supplies from a first aid kit. The bleeding slowed, but you need a hospital. Not yet, Sarah insisted. Not until we finish this. She pushed a laptop toward them. Everything's here. The data I extracted from the terminal, plus what Bobby and I gathered over the past 48 hours. Complete profiles on Reed, Volkov, Matthews. Detailed plans for Chimera deployment in all 8 target cities. Financial trails linking Phoenix development to weapons research and human trafficking. Mike and Jennifer reviewed the files together, the scope of the conspiracy unfolding before them in damning detail. It was more extensive than they had imagined. Politicians, intelligence officials, corporate leaders across multiple countries, all complicit in a plot that would have resulted in thousands of deaths. We need to release this now, Mike decided. All of it. Jennifer was already setting up her own laptop, establishing secure connections to her journalistic contacts. I'm on it. Within an hour, this will be on every major news site worldwide. As Jennifer worked, Mike turned to Sarah. Reed? Unconfirmed, she replied. But if he survived, he'll come for us. For you especially. Uplift him, Mike said, retrieving his Sig Sauer from Sarah's equipment bag where Bobby had left it for safekeeping. I'm done running from shadows. The cabin fell into focused silence, broken only by the click of keyboard keys as Jennifer worked and the occasional crackle from the fireplace. Outside, the snow continued to fall, nature's blanket slowly covering the evidence of violence and tragedy. Mike found himself standing at the window, watching the white landscape with vigilant eyes. The mission was nearly complete, but experience had taught him that the most dangerous moment in any operation was often the last. When victory seemed assured, when guards began to lower. His phone vibrated with an incoming call from an unknown number. Mike hesitated, then answered, putting it on speaker. Impressive work, Harrington. Reed's voice emerged, strained but unmistakable. Your daughter shoots better than expected. Mike exchanged glances with Sarah and Jennifer. You're resilient, I'll give you that. More than you know. Reed's chuckle turned into a pained cough. You've won this round. The Chimera deployment is compromised, my reputation in tatters. But this isn't over. It is for you, Mike countered. Your operation is exposed. Your partners will distance the balls faster than rats from a sinking ship. It's finished, Reed. Nothing is ever truly finished, Michael. You of all people should understand that. A pause, then. We'll see each other again. Count on it. The line went dead. Can he be traced? Mike asked Jennifer. She shook her head. Burner phone, probably. But it doesn't matter. In 30 minutes, he'll be the most wanted man in America. True to her word, Jennifer's media contacts moved with extraordinary speed. Within the hour, the story broke simultaneously across multiple platforms. Detailed exposés of Project Chimera, the Phoenix Development Front, the international conspiracy behind it all. The evidence was irrefutable, the implications staggering. By dawn, federal agents were arresting Matthews and other American conspirators. Interpol had issued red notices for Volkov and his associates. Reed himself had vanished from his hospital bed, but with his face on every news broadcast and his assets frozen, his power was broken, at least for now. 3 weeks later, the Ramirez grocery store was bustling with activity. The under new management sign had been removed, and the family business was thriving once again. Miguel Ramirez stood proudly behind the counter, serving customers with the same dignity and warmth he had shown for decades. "Mr. Harrington," he called out when Mike entered. "Good to see you. How are you feeling?" "Better every day," Mike replied with a genuine smile. His side had healed well, though he still felt occasional twinges when the weather changed. "Your usual?" Miguel asked, already reaching for the specialty coffee beans Mike preferred. "Please, and how's the family?" Miguel beamed. "My grandson starts college next fall. Full scholarship. First in the family." "That's wonderful news," Mike said, meaning it. This, the ordinary miracle of families building futures, free from the shadows of conspiracies and the machinations of powerful men, this was what made everything worthwhile. Mike's next stop was the Chen restaurant, where Li Chen greeted him with the same quiet strength she had shown throughout their ordeal. The restaurant was packed, benefiting from the positive publicity that had come with the Phoenix Development Exposé. "You will stay for lunch," Li said. It wasn't a question. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Mike assured her. As he ate, he watched the normal rhythms of life unfold around him. Families sharing meals, waitstaff bustling between tables, the sounds of conversation and laughter filling the air. It seemed impossible that just weeks ago, this place had been targeted for destruction, its owner marked for elimination. After lunch, Mike drove to the cemetery. The day was crisp but sunny, the snow beginning to melt, revealing the first hints of spring's eventual arrival. Bobby's headstone was simple, as he would have wanted: name, dates, and the Special Forces insignia. No mention of his classified service, his extraordinary bravery, or his final sacrifice. Those who needed to know, knew. Mike placed a small bottle of bourbon, Bobby's favorite, at the base of the stone. "We did it, old friend," he said quietly. "Reed's operation is dismantled. Chimera is destroyed. And those families you helped save, they're doing just fine." He stood in silence for a moment, remembering. Not just Bobby, but all the others lost along the way. Jackson and Reeves in Basra. Countless nameless victims of weapons that should never have existed. Even Caroline, whose battle with cancer had been fought while Mike was chasing shadows that wouldn't stay buried. So much loss, so much sacrifice. But not in vain, never in vain. His phone chimed with a text message from Jennifer. "On my way home. Dinner still on for tonight?" He smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it. I'm cooking." Her reply came quickly. "Brave man, see you at 7. Mike pocketed his phone and took one last look at Bobby's grave. "Rest easy, soldier. We'll take it from here." As he walked back to his car, Mike felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: a lightness, a sense of possibility. The world hadn't suddenly become safer or more just. Men like Reed still existed, still plotted, still caused harm. But for now, in this moment, a particular darkness had been pushed back. A specific threat had been neutralized. And perhaps most importantly, Mike Harrington, lawyer, former agent, father, had found his way back to the light, to connection, to family. That evening, as he prepared dinner in his lakeside cabin, Mike heard the sound of Jennifer's car in the driveway. Sarah was already there, her arm in a sling but otherwise recovered, helping set the table despite Mike's protest that she was a guest. "Dad?" Jennifer called as she entered, bringing a blast of cold air with her. "Something smells amazing." "Don't sound so surprised," Mike called back. "I do know how to cook." Since when? Jennifer appeared in the kitchen doorway, snowflakes melting in her dark hair. Your father was always the chef in our unit, Sarah informed her, passing by with plates. We ate better than any other team in Iraq. How did I not know this? Jennifer marveled, hanging up her coat. There's a lot we're still learning about each other, Mike said, the simple truth of it striking him anew. Dinner was simple but good. Mike's specialty pasta, a salad, fresh bread from the bakery in town. The conversation flowed easily, touching on Jennifer's latest article, a follow-up piece on Phoenix Development's victims, Sarah's plans to reopen her security consulting business, and Mike's consideration of taking on a few new clients. All straightforward legal cases, no international conspiracies. I got a call from Jimmy today, Mike mentioned as they were finishing dessert. Matthews is cooperating with federal prosecutors, rolling over on everyone in exchange for a reduced sentence. Typical, Sarah said with disgust, always looking out for number one. But useful, Jennifer pointed out. His testimony will help put away a lot of people who might have otherwise escaped justice. True enough, Mike conceded. And the Chimera research? Any word on that? Sarah shook her head. See, and military containment teams have secured all known samples. The formulas and the data we recovered have been classified at the highest levels. It won't see the light of day again, at least not through official channels. And Reed? Jennifer asked the question they'd all been thinking. Still in the wind, Mike said. But with every asset frozen, every ally under investigation, every safe house compromised, he's running out of options. You think he'll try to rebuild? Sarah asked. Eventually. Men like Reed don't change, and they don't stop. Mike's expression grew thoughtful. But when he resurfaces, we'll be ready. We? Jennifer raised an eyebrow. Planning to make this a family business, Dad? Mike laughed, the sound surprising even himself. God, no. One international conspiracy is enough for a lifetime. He looked at his daughter, then at Sarah, the family he had, the family he had found. But whatever comes next, we face it together. No more secrets. No more shadows. Later, after Sarah had gone to the guest room and Jennifer was preparing for bed in her old room, Mike stood on the back porch looking out at the frozen lake. The night was clear now, stars sharp as diamonds above, the moon casting silver light across the snow. He thought of that morning in his office when a simple mistake, an intruder yanking his hair, had set everything in motion. How close he had come to losing everything. How close the world had come to a catastrophe few would ever know had been averted. Mike ran a hand through his short silver hair, a smile touching his lips. Such a small thing, that instinctive grab for control. Such a fatal miscalculation. They had underestimated him then. Underestimated what an aging lawyer with a military past might still be capable of. Underestimated the strength that comes not from youth or power or resources, but from conviction, from purpose, from love. Mike Harrington turned back toward the warm light of his home, where his daughter was safe, where his friend was healing, where the future waited, uncertain as always, but faced now with open eyes and an unburdened heart. Some battles were won, some demons laid to rest, some debts at last repaid. And if Reed or others like him ever returned from the shadows, well, Mike would be ready. After all, he had a lot to protect.